I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
The African influence is growing in hip-hop with the explosion of Afrobeats music. And as hip-hop culture becomes more international, it's opening up new doors around the world. The video for French Montana and Swae Lee's groundbreaking 2017 hit, Unforgettable, was filmed in Uganda and has been viewed more than 1 billion times on YouTube. Its success paving the way for many others, like Casanova and Davido's hit 2 a.m.
I see a lot of the hip-hop artists are collabing with the African artists now, which is pushing the culture a little further, and I think it's also starting to broaden the horizons of hip-hop. It's making hip-hop even bigger.
DJ Wallah took a chance and broke Afro B's Joanna on Hot 97. He says the appeal of the Afrobeat sound is universal.
The energy is like you're playing a brand new song that everyone loves, or is a song that everyone can dance to, vibe out with.
Nigerian artist Burna Boy has enjoyed Billboard top 10 chart success with his unique sound. Dr. Chris Emdin says the hip-hop African connection is real and deep.
Musically, there's something about that rhythm. In hip-hop, they call it the boom bap. You know, in West Africa and Nigeria, it's the thong thong of the talking drum. And the talking drum and the boom bap of hip-hop. Same.
The growing number of collaborations between hip-hop artists and African artists is a way for artists to expand their audience without alienating their core fans, says YouTube's director of urban music, Tuma Basa.
It's a relationship. So it's basically exchanging sounds, exchanging audiences. It's been happening in hip-hop for a long time. It's building, it's creating the pipeline.
It's inevitable that Afrobeats is here to stay. And the reason why is because it's not necessarily the backbone of any particular genre. It's a fusion of multiple genres.
There are many layers to this, both in terms of music and culture. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Dr. Chris Emdin. He's a professor at the Teachers College at Columbia University. He's the creator and founder of Hip Hop Ed and Science Genius and author of the book For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood. Chris, great to have you with us again.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Also with us is Tuma Basa. He's the director of urban music for YouTube. He's a former head of global programming for Spotify, and he curated the very popular Rap Caviar playlist. Tuma, great to have you back with us all.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is DJ Wallah. He's a Hot 97 DJ. He's one of the heavy hitter DJs. He broke the Afrobeat Joanna song, the famous one, on Hot 97's air, and we're going to talk with him about what it's like in the clubs and what it's like with all the fans and the music listeners. DJ Wallah, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Chris, is there a real connection between African culture and the hip-hop music that we know that started in the Bronx?
Absolutely. I always make the argument that hip-hop was hip-hop before we named it hip-hop. So the origin story always begins in the 1970s with DJ Kool Herc, and if you trace back Herc came from Jamaica. You take a trace back Herc's heritage in Jamaica. We talk about folks on slave ships that landed in Jamaica. You go even further, you always get back to West Africa. And in West Africa, when you had the talking drums, when folks would gather in circles, where you had the griots and the storytellers, when folks went through pain and oppression, and the only way to get over it was through dance and through music and through rhythm and through poetry and storytelling, that was hip hop. So what happened in the 70s was literally the evolution of Afrocentric ways of knowing and being that always gets triggered when there's trauma. See, our people, always when there's trauma, music and beats and rhythm is our escape. So in the Bronx, and the Bronx was burning, and folks were leaving that borough, and those young folks couldn't get into the clubs in Manhattan, that was the trigger for the music to do something. So it triggered, and so that Afrocentric roots from slave ships in West Africa just came back to life. They had drums, they had dance, they had release. We named it hip hop. But what was hip hop was already intrinsically embedded into our genetic code as a response to oppression. And so whenever we talk about hip hop and we talk about Afrobeats, we talk about Afrobeats, any music of the diaspora of oppressed people has roots on the soils of Africa.
Of those countries. Tuma, when you hear what Dr. Chris Emdin is saying,
deep.
You're shaking your head.
No, I was
you
agreeing.
listen to music from all over the world,
Yeah.
and you've been and you've spent a lot of time in your career in American hip hop and the rap scene.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the African influence?
Well, the thing is this is I credit technology, right? Because what happened was the opportunities didn't exist before. The music was always there, the spirit, the connection was not there because there was no vehicle to distribute, right? And so now with technology, with social media, with YouTube, with bulk travel, where you don't, it's not as expensive anymore to travel. So now you're having artists coming from Africa to America. You're having African Americans going back to Africa. Yeah. So it almost reminds me of the 90s when everyone used to go down to Atlanta, and it would be Freaknik and all these things, and people would go back home excited about music from down south, and the people who didn't travel didn't understand it completely. They were like wow, what's going on here, et cetera, and maybe rejected it. And I think some of the lessons from that time, especially for New York, right? Especially for New York, because New York was probably, I think, where now people are embracing new sounds. They're, right? And everything what you just said historically, 100% agree with. My family is from Rwanda originally, and they used to have something called chivugo. It's like a braggadocio type of like poetry and kind of banter and wit, and then grew up in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, they used to have something called zwiraway. And zwiraway was like proverbs, like very like thing. So all this time in American music, I always knew that, okay, this is directly
like that same swag, what we would call the hip hop swag.
Exactly.
It's basically where it's like, I'm this, I'm that. And there it has its roots in that. Yeah.
There they have different words for that, like because swag is basically talking about like gravitas, it's like the way you carry yourself, etc.
Attitude more.
So in Rwanda, oh my gosh, okay, never mind. I'll get to it in a second. In South Africa, they have like Ubuntu. You know what I mean? It's like a way of carrying yourself, a way of
presence.
Yeah, presence.
You ever heard about the Sapuers in the Congo?
Sapuers, of course. I was born in Congo.
And those dudes, to me, they're not rapping. Yeah. But these dudes in the middle of a war-torn country will throw on these suits and these colors and these walks, and they move down the street, and their presence is like an artist.
I want to talk about the presence.
Can I add to what he's saying about Saper?
What'd you say?
Okay, Saper. So Saper, they're part of a lifestyle they call Kitende.
Yeah.
Right? So Papa Wemba was like the godfather of that. So these guys can be poor, but they'll be wearing brand names and colorful, and it's about the respect. It's about
which is so reminiscent of what we see as hip hop.
It's exactly what it is.
Let me bring in healing. I want to talk about the healing and the life affirming thing, but I want to talk about Wallah, when you hear this, because you play to a lot of diverse audiences, city, urban, suburbs, different types of clubs. What do you see this direct connection that they're talking about?
Do you feel the energy that these two men had just now, discussing the music? That's the same type of energy that happens when you play the music. Wow, that's why I sat back for a second. I just watched, and I had a smile on my face, like, yo, look how passionate they are. But that's the same type of energy that the crowd responds to when we play this music. Look, for a long time when I was playing Afrobeat, people that didn't know any better thought it was reggae. Oh, that's reggae. Oh, it's Caribbean music. The Africans in the party that didn't get a chance to hear it that much appreciated it, loved it, loved it.
Oh, man.
They become your biggest fans. They go to every party with you, to the point where it's acceptable. In my opinion, Afrobeat is the biggest genre of music out right now.
Do you consider it part of hip hop? Even though we're playing it on hip hop stations, we're playing it.
I think it's still its own thing, but like all things hip hop, we kind of take it, borrow it, use it, and now you have hip hop artists collaborating with Afrobeat artists. Some of the biggest records out now have a hip hop artist featuring a Davido, hip hop artist featuring a Wizkid, and I think hip hop has always been that music genre that, for lack of better words, we borrowed, we stole, and made it our own.
Okay, we need to take a short break, but when we come back, what is it about?
I know.
Don't hate me, I'm just doing my job. When we come back, what is it about the sounds of the Afrobeats and African music that is catching so many people's attention? That's coming up next.
This is the first time in their whole life experience that folks are not looking at them like you have value, you have worth, you have privilege.
Tuma, is Afrobeats, do you consider that hip hop? I mean, this is your whole career.
It's its own lane, but it's family, right? So basically, the way that R&B and hip hop complement each other, Afrobeats Afrobeats, we'll call it Afrobeats for lack of a better description because of the whole Afrobeats discussion, is complements hip hop. So that's why you have these collaborations. That's why. So it's not competition. It complements. It covers a different ground, a different lane, different energy, but it's coming from the same place. And a lot of artists fuse hip hop, not just through the features. You know what I mean? Through the swag, through the rhymes, and then you actually have African hip hop there, like in Nigeria you have MI or Casper Nyovest or Nasty C in South Africa.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's actually like rappers battle rapping and want that African hip hop space to be recognized on the global platform too. So
for
that's
its
why,
own merits.
Yeah. So that's why it's very, very important that we deal with the categorization with nuance. You know.
So when you talk about that, so there's hardcore, what we call hardcore rappers in Africa that have very big
and
followings,
the history of it
and they're
too.
famous there.
Yeah, but what's happened with this, I think part of the reason it's taken off
Afrobeats.
is because it's I don't want to call it new because that sounds like novelty. It's so different.
More mainstream.
Yeah, it's different. It's authentic.
Right.
These guys are authentic and different too, but America has that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? The world, the rest of the world. Let's not say America. Europe, America. You're talking about Latin
Britain,
America.
UK.
Britain, UK. It's huge.
Huge.
You go to UK. it's
even
huge.
Afro B is from the UK.
Yeah,
Right.
He's from UK. Yeah.
Right.
He's a good DJ too. You know.
His story is also really fascinating.
Yeah.
But what I want folks to recognize that's going on here is a shift from an American culture that is very Eurocentric in its initial leanings to a more Afrocentric approach to collaboration. So America has always had this rugged individualism narrative. Like I came up
by
and
myself
I struggled,
and nobody
and
helped
it's
me.
just me.
Right.
And if I'm great, I'll bring some of my crew. But I always have to be the leader of my crew. Like, you know, I mean, the whole 50 don't say I owe money, but, you know, I have to be the 50 Cent of my G unit. You know, I have to be the one person who brings my crew on. And it's this rugged individualism that's a part of Americana. And hip hop absorbed that of having a solo artist. And what's happening now is that we're moving from a Eurocentric, it's just me tradition, to a more Afrocentric collaboration, crew, community narrative. So we have a diasporic convergence. It's almost like a newfound Marcus Garvey-esque moment.
It's very Marcus Garvey.
Very much.
All right, explain that. What do you explain that?
Actually, that's so interesting you say Marcus Garvey because remember the Revolt Summit I even mentioned Marcus Garvey. So basically, Marcus Garvey's dream was for African Americans to connect with Africa and have the ability to go to Africa, be at home, and not be disconnected. Yeah. And that was and the streets of Harlem were on fire at the time. I'm not a historian, but that vision was cut short, right? Because we know how America works sometimes, and that's the polite way. But what happens is the music is bringing us together. And this is some of the beautiful about what's happening with Afrobeats music in America and Europe is people who were born in Africa or immigrate from there don't have to feel ashamed. It makes you feel good about like your African heritage.
Just the hook, Joanna, Joanna. And my way of knowing if it's a hit or not is if my mom knows it. If my mom is singing along to it, that's a hit.
Wallah, when you played Joanna, give us an idea of the whole setting for that and what happened and how you knew something was going on.
Just based off radio, I don't think I was allowed to play that record. But the record felt good, and I don't know if the program director knew what I was doing at the time because it flowed in with the flow of the music at the current time. Because you know Drake had the record One Dance that was kind of similar to Afrobeat, and there was a few records similar to that where I can throw Joanna in, it sound good, and the program director didn't know that that's not on the list. But the record had a dance to it, it had a feel to it. People loved it. It was easy to grasp. And even though I don't know the lyrics, I really don't know what he's saying throughout the verses, just the hook, Joanna, Joanna. And my way of knowing if it's a hit or not is if my mom knows it. If my mom is singing along to it, that's a hit.
And what kind of did you get were people calling?
People
did you get
loved
text
it.
messages?
You know why? Because the African people, the Caribbean people that know about Afrobeat, that knew about it, they don't get a chance to hear it on the air.
Right.
So when they heard their music on the air, of course they gravitated towards it. They were reposting it. And then when Afro B found out his record was playing, he went crazy. He came to America. He came here.
He came to Hot 97.
He came to Hot 97.
Right.
He wanted to see it for himself.
And he ended up on the Summer Jam stage.
Because look, a lot of the Afrobeat artists are huge already. Millions of followers, blue checks. They make plenty of money. But they still want their record or want to be recognized here in New York, Hot 97. They hear their record on New York radio. That's still an accomplishment for them.
Yeah,
a major
because
accomplishment.
they're fans of
What
New
about
York
the
music.
music?
Yeah, because they're fans of New York music. They've grown up listening to music that came from here, looking up. So there's already that mutual respect and everything. And then records like Joanna or Drogba is a lot of times they marinate in the UK and in Africa. You know what I mean? Yeah. And on social media, on YouTube, they become really big. People are doing dances to them. It's, you know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera, and going.
Right.
Yeah. So what's happened is America's kind of catching up now.
Yep.
Literally, you know what I mean? So a lot of these records over there, they're almost like, okay, I don't want to say burnt out, but they've had their shelf life. They're on the
And they're
new
ready
song
for
already.
something.
years old, 4 years old.
exactly.
What about the what
No?
about the African immigrants too around the world too?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you look at UK, you look at Europe, you look at some
yeah.
of the places now that are the hottest are the
Yeah, I mean,
UK,
let's be clear,
Ghana.
everywhere.
right? Nigeria, which is probably the chief hub where most of the upcoming artists are emerging from, is the most populous nation in the world. So essentially,
black people in the world.
black people in the world.
Black people in the
So
world, yeah.
oh yeah, because we can't forget about China.
Yeah,
But the point here is that those folks essentially they don't necessarily need an American audience for validation. I think that's a
Or to
really
be
important
successful,
point.
right?
Yeah,
To be
but,
successful,
but
I mean,
the paycheck helps.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean? Like the U.S. dollars.
Everyone loves the dollar.
Yeah.
but it's
It's
ill
hard currency.
when folks are chasing you. It's a different
Yeah,
relationship.
no, there's no chasing. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like they don't have to chase.
No,
like if I'm
no,
popping
yeah.
and I got my numbers, then at some point you're looking for me.
Yeah.
I think that sense of, and I want to take that to a culture perspective. For a population that's historically always been the one who's been ostracized,
Right.
to now become the center, and folks want to gravitate towards you. That does a lot for your psyche, your ego, your sense of self. And I want to bring this because I always got to bring this back to schools.
Of course.
In New York City public schools, where a vast majority of the students in New York City public schools are African immigrants.
Yeah, a
And
lot.
we know the story
Yeah.
of the things that have been told about those students. If these
Yeah.
two men have experienced that perspective and perception of African peers in school, and those young folks are always on the margins, this is the
Yeah.
first time in their whole life experience that folks are not looking at them like you have value, you have worth, you have privilege. I was working with some youth the other day, some African immigrants, a kid that just came from Nigeria, and the kids were asking, his friends were asking him, what was he saying on that track? So the
which
the
is
kids
good.
in
Yeah,
the
how
hood,
do we know?
good,
no,
yeah,
the kids in the hood are asking the African kids to interpret Pidgin English and Yoruba to them for the first time.
What about the whites? What about the Latinos? What about the Asians who are also big consumers of this music as well? Do you see them adopting these cultural values as well?
Fat Joe
as
said it best, and Fat Joe is our guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And shout out to Fat Joe. I'll never forget him for that Rikers moment.
Right.
But Fat Joe said this best in an interview about 3 weeks ago when he goes, "Man, yeah, my music, Latino music, that's African music." And we have to understand that if we all trace back our origins as Africa, folks in other spaces around the world has always tried to, I hate to say it this way, right? But there's always been a reverence for Africanness in everywhere except for America. And or folks who want to hold on to power.
Right.
And so there's a merging, there's a fusion. When you just talk about the J Balvin track, J Balvin is doing tracks with Afrobeat artists with features with rappers. Look, we are in a post-structural society.
Yeah.
Let's just own it.
All right, on that's going to have to be the last note. I want to thank you for being with us for this episode of Street Soldiers.
you.
Dr. Chris Emdin, great to have you with us. Tuma Basa, great to have you.
Thank you.
And and DJ Wallah, thank you
He's
so
not
much.
done, but thank you.
Thank you so much. I know y'all. I know nobody. I'm not done either, but they're done with us. Okay, so I want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers. Remember, use your mind; it's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace.